The word communism is such a dirty word in the US, with so many misconceptions that mostly throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it is no accident. With the writing of the Communist Manifesto in 1849, the workers began organizing and unionizing to get more earnings for their own labor instead of letting people who already have money make more money off of another person's labor. The moneyed class hated this idea and began a smear campaign on the notion of communism in general, filling the public mind full of misconceptions. The average person doesn't even know the differences between fascism, communism, and socialism, just that both fascism and communism as a system of government have always been dictatorships and brutal. Sadly, Marx's positive positions toward armed revolution, based on the success of American and French revolutions, usually just led to strong men with military might spouting communist rhetoric dogmatically and punishing anyone who disagreed with them on anything. Modern Western social democrats tend to pursue the tactics of Gandhi and MLK these days, but just like how the far right has its violent militant radicals, the far left does as well. Sadly, this just gave way more fodder to the anti-Marx camp, ensuring his views were buried to all but specific students of political science or the rare political freethinker. The Communist Manifesto also had a blind faith in what the government can do, and while governmental communism does well at moving nations from third to second world level of poverty and technology, it is terrible at bumping the average person beyond the second world living standards, as it stifles innovation, free speech, and the ability to try things in terms of business. Governments are great at doing things we already know how to do, and that everyone needs, and can do things for way cheaper thanks to economics of scale. Hence why pretty much all nations are a hybrid of socialist and capitalist. Governmental communism would and has always been quite terrible. However, Marxist communism, on a business level, appears to be much better than capitalism. In a single ownership business, partnership, or LLC, labor is a contractual agreement between 2 or 3 individuals. If most of the jobs available are like this, like they were prior to the Civil War, the laborer has just as much negotiating power as the person hiring them. It works very well. The laborer has just as much power to tell the employer to go to hell and move on to a different job as the employer does. However, as publicly and privately traded corporations began to take over the job landscape, the companies are no longer owned by individuals. They're owned and voted on by groups of people with one goal in mind, the majority of them being incredibly wealthy people. And that goal is to make money. Capitalism is a system where one can raise money for business by selling bits of ownership, profits, and losses to people who have money. Well, losses assuming you're not gigantic, and the government won't bail you out. Sometimes this is using people's retirement savings, but since one needs to diversify in case one company fails, most people's vote in a company would be a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the part very wealthy individuals own. They are the ones voting in CEOs and deciding pay levels, with the workers in the company having zero input on the leadership. Workers work for whatever the current market level decides, or governmental pay levels, which is completely alienated from how well the business itself is actually doing. Most employees feel absolutely no loyalty or connection to their work, which reduces incentives from lower-level innovation and hard work. The more isolated they feel, the more apathy to their jobs exists, and they do the least amount of work to keep themselves from getting fired. An alternative form of communism involves bringing democracy to the workplace itself. Our current corporate system works as if the only people who were allowed to vote were foreign lenders. They are in no way impacted by any of the decisions made by their government, ensuring great profits for the lenders, but terrible repercussions for the actual citizens. All studies show that even the most bleeding-hearted liberal, when running a simulated company as a CEO, must be ruthless and break the bonds of ethics and exploit their workers just to survive in our current system of business. Certain groups have gotten around this. Cooperatives have done great work and thrive in the free market system where corporations do. As their workers own shares in their business, their pay, which is much higher than minimum, is linked directly to how well they are doing. And since their CEO is not solely interested in making money, their community and environmental ethics are much higher. However, these are tiny compared to the corporate takeover of the world. They are small and thrive in a desert of cold cash for the very wealthy. The only way to fix this would be to force companies to pay stock to their employees until the employees have enough voting power to elect CEOs, somewhere between 51 and 80%. Stock would be used as pensions for the employees, and they would sell their stock upon retirement, which would get redirected to new employees. The longer employed equals greater stock one has in the company. 70 years works great as a limit to how long a corporation can stay mostly corporate owned, quite similar to copyright. The original creator will probably be already dead and gotten all the rewards of creativity and hard work out of it. After that point, what they have left is a big greedy machine that hates changing and loves to stifle innovation if they can, while little startups don't have that much funding. Moving most of the shares to workers would drive harder work, while capital would look for startup corporations to own and fund, increasing the speed of innovation. A good model to explain it would be, until a corporation turns 50 years old, to have a percent of stock to be labor-owned to match the age of the company. If the company is 5 years old, labor owns 5% shares. 70 years would use smaller increments. Doing this kind of national corporate overhaul would be incredibly tricky, and would take probably around 20 years to get to the ideal point. The older the traded corporation, the more quickly they would have to get themselves to 51% labor ownership. Old corporations would have to transfer their stock to 10% every 4 years, while all younger companies would have to move much slower. If they can't keep up, then they probably weren't truly market competitive to begin with, and were just relying on their seniority and not their innovation in the market. If an older company buys a younger company, the older company's status would have to stand, or they would try to get around it by claiming a younger status. One could switch the company to a younger status through sole ownership, but it would still have to keep its age if they switched back to a trade company, and the owner would have to front all the risks. Norway owns 80% of all stocks in their country, and is listed as one of the top 10 nations to do business with. Workers doing so sounds much better than the government doing so. However, at this point, we're just trying to move people to a living wage based on cost of living, and there is a stiff resistance to just that. Even raising minimum wage, which has problems as every area has different costs of living, is met with anger. Minimum wage should be about $22.50 an hour in the most expensive New York county, and every county will be adjusted based on their cost of living. This translates to about $11.50 an hour in Indianapolis, which is completely livable there, but would be the equivalent to $6 per hour in New York City. Getting the average person to vote for their self-interest in this matter is going to take a lot of work. 20 years to get switched over is a great goal, considering 40% of all jobs are sent to be replaced by computers or robots in 20 years, which was exactly what Marx predicted when he considered the entire problem with capitalism. Automation keeps replacing workers faster than workers have to be organized before their field is destroyed. This constant musical chairs of job force ensures there are always people left without a chair, or house, or full job. Unless we can encourage innovation by moving capital to new startups and ensure that laborers have the wealth, time, and energy to tinker with new ideas that can get said capital to create new businesses and therefore jobs, we're going to have some serious problems in the next decades. Marx was right about most things and wrong about a few. America needs to stop vilifying Marx for the few bad ideas that led to dogmatic brutality by rabid mobs and strongmen. Democracy was always his goal. If America is going to do that, then it needs to begin vilifying the Founding Fathers for allowing slavery and the massacre of Native people, and throw the whole Constitution out as an evil document because the people who wrote it were flawed and some people misread and abused it. You know, the same Founding Fathers that completely outlawed corporations as they had too much power over government, which was the entire point of the Boston Tea Party.